Welcome into Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for black news, black views, and black opinions. Today is Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, the Pentagon puts thousands of troops on high alert as the U.S. weighs military action against Russia. President Biden apologizes for calling a reporter a vulgar phrase. Then, could estate planning be the key to African Americans creating generational wealth? An attorney stops by Fox Soul's Black Report.
Plus, how the child tax credit improves babies' cognitive function, and rapper Nas still imagines if he ruled the world, investing millions of dollars in South African technology startup.
Can't wait to hear about that story. Soulmates, we have so much to talk about today, and you know we do it in our voice and in our truth. You ready? Let's go.
Topping your headlines this Tuesday, the White House says Russia's invasion of Ukraine remains imminent. Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying that they believe Russia could launch an attack at any point. This has prompted the Pentagon to put 8,500 troops on heightened alert. Now, this comes as Russia is conducting military drills on the Ukrainian border, positioning more than 100,000 troops there. U.S. military forces are working with NATO to deter President Vladimir Putin's aggression. Up until recently, President Biden relied on diplomacy, attempting to negotiate with Russia and threatening potential sanctions. Now, African American soldiers make up a sizable portion of active duty military personnel. About 30% of them are black men, another 17% are black women. That's higher than the proportion of black people to the U.S. population. So this could have a tremendous impact on a lot of black families. We know that black veterans play a large role in our operations when it comes to defense. And so I think that's lost upon a lot of people oftentimes when we're talking about these stories, how it impacts families.
Absolutely. I have a long family history of military, my mom, grandfather, father, everyone. So the question that a lot of people have online right now is that President Biden seems very reactive versus proactive. We just got the rest of our troops out of Afghanistan, and so it's like another war. Do we want that? And so that seems to be what a lot of people are concerned about right now. Do we want to have another war right now? Also, 8,500 troops sounds like a big number, but when you're going to somebody else's country, is that going to be enough?
It's not that many.
I want to talk about Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who was the first African American to hold the position. He was responsible for designating those 8,500 troops and releasing them over to Ukraine. And also, I just want to talk about his leadership and why, I feel a little trust in that. He oversaw the Iraq war, and he was responsible for pulling the troops out of Afghanistan. And if you remember the congressional hearings about that, he caught a little heat for that. But his leadership so far has proven to be right. And we just have to wait and see how he handles this situation.
We're definitely going to see what happens. At the end of the day, President and the Vice President, they stepped out and they said, look, we're going to handle business if things go a certain way. And they have to stand by that and live by that. But, I just think back to the beginning when Frederick Douglass, way back then, when he was encouraging black men to enlist then just to become citizens. This is not the case now. But once again, there will be some black men and women on the front line if this does happen.
Absolutely.
An Atlanta area prosecutor can move forward with her investigation into possible election interference crimes by former President Donald Trump. A judge has approved DA Fani Willis' request to call for a special grand jury. Now, Willis says her probe will investigate Trump's call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who Trump asked Raffensperger to find enough votes to return Joe Biden's win in the state's presidential election. Now, last week, Trump said he didn't do anything wrong on that phone call. Now, we've heard the call, and Trump asked for him to find about 11,000 votes. And I just think about when Stacey Abrams ran and, where it says that the election was taken from her. Can you imagine if she called the Secretary of State? She wouldn't even be able to run for governor right now. And so as the cases mount up, it's good to know that we have 3 black electeds. We're talking about the Attorney General in New York, the DA in New York, and now the prosecutor in Georgia, who are investigating Donald Trump to find his, misdoings in this country.
As my grandmother said, the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is that phone call. When you have that, what more do you need, right? Here is a man that was doing whatever it takes to flip the election back over again because he lost that state and he lost the election. Between this and the things he's going to be going through in the state of New York, they have to find a way to get to this man before midterms or definitely 2024.
Romeo, I absolutely agree that the proof is in the pudding. But one question, again, that people are having online is that it doesn't start until May. That seemed to be all of the good that was in this. Everyone kept saying, like, why does it not begin to May? And so to the soulmates that want to know, it's a lot that goes into getting the people that can sit on a special grand jury, have to get those people, subpoena witnesses, documents, a lot of pre-work. And so she seems very confident. I'm confident, but also I need to see the follow through. Back to what Romeo was saying.
She said that she expects for a decision to be made in this case within this year, within 2022. So she has a lot of confidence in the way her investigation is moving. I think it's nice to be talking about a special grand jury in this instance and not in the instance we typically are talking about it when it comes to prosecuting officers and other people for wrongdoing.
So, absolutely. We will definitely see how that turns out. So President Joe Biden, he used a vulgar word to describe a Fox News reporter who asked a question during a meeting at the White House on Monday. Several reporters gathered and shouted questions at Biden after his remarks. Now, Peter Ducey from Fox News asked the president if inflation was political liability. Biden responded sarcastically, adding a PG-13 rated phrase to describe the reporter, and it was caught on a hot microphone.
Do you think inflation is a political liability out of the midterms?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a...
Ducey said the president called him on Monday night to apologize. The reality here is that Joe Biden is human. We all have said an obscenity. We've all said curse words here or there. But the other reality is that, I will say this, is that if this was Trump, this would not be good. We would be crucifying Trump right now if this was him. We found everything that Trump did was wrong. And so I feel like in this instance, we don't want to see Trump, we don't want to see, Joe Biden not be a human. We don't want to see that from him.
Well, I mean, yes, Trump set the bar so low. I don't know that we want to see Biden engaging in this kind of incivility. He's no stranger to hot mic moments. He's cursed and been caught before. But I do think that Biden has to rein in his temper. He doesn't like when reporters ask questions that are outside of what an event is, and that's really not his call. I'm a reporter. I'm going to ask any question about anything relevant at a press conference. You can decide not to answer, but this is Biden's fault because he's just got to get his temper under control.
Like you said, Seth, Biden is notorious all throughout the Obama administration. It was like, shh, say less, Biden, because, you know, he just oozes out the mouth with these types of remarks. So, I mean, it was a funny gaffe.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But he'll be fine. Trust me, this is Biden. This is what he does. All right. Vice President Harris promoted the Environmental Protection Agency's work on replacing lead pipes in Milwaukee. Harris has celebrated the Biden administration's $1 trillion infrastructure bill during Monday's visit. The vice president met with union workers who replaced old rusted pipes around the city.
And so that is what today represents. That is what the bipartisan infrastructure law represents, which is a moment where we will finally take action on an issue that has impacted our babies, the babies of a community, our collective children, an issue that has impacted seniors who at that stage of life are particularly vulnerable to toxins, which is what we are talking about when we're talking about lead pipes.
Now, it's all part of the White House plan to replace lead pipes around the nation over the next decade. $48 million have been earmarked for Wisconsin to upgrade its infrastructure. And, you know, she went on record to also note that 50% of children in the country are either exposed to lead or at risk of exposure. The only solution here is to get rid of the lead in our pipes and in our paint. And I agree 100%. Infrastructure bill, the one thing that did get done, right? So now it's time to make moves and make things happen with that money.
I mean, this goes back to some of the promises that the Biden administration has made. Biden said that they plan to replace 100% of lead pipes in U.S. homes. A lot of people wondered, where's the timeline with that? And so everybody deserves to drink clean water, but the problem here is that lead pipes affect the black community at disproportionate rates.
Absolutely. It's hard to think that in 2022 we're still talking about lead in pipes. And studies show that black children who live at or below the poverty level are 4 times more likely to test positive for lead in their systems. It's clearly a problem that needs to be addressed on a massive scale. So shout out to Kamala Harris and Michael Reagan, the first HBCU grad running the EPA. Hopefully, there are a lot of EPA super sites, even in St. Louis, Romeo. I covered a lot of them. These places where black communities have been neglected because of companies that have just not done things to protect the health of the people that live there.
That's right. Well, representation does matter, and you brought up Michael S. Reagan, who is the first man of color to be in the position as EPA administrator. So it's good to see, because he understands the disparities in communities of color. And, you know, as we talk about infrastructure and marrying the EPA with infrastructure, it's good to know that he's in charge. One of the 3 former Minneapolis cops charged in the death of George Floyd will testify in his own defense. Thomas Lane, the rookie officer who held down Floyd's legs, can be heard on the video asking Derek Chauvin if Floyd should be turned on his side. The federal trial of the 3 officers who helped Chauvin restrain Floyd started yesterday. Chauvin, the officers have been charged with aiding and abetting, along with second-degree murder and manslaughter. Chauvin is currently serving a 22.5-year sentence on state's murder charges. He's pled guilty to the federal charges.
As New York City continues to deal with this wave of gun violence, Mayor Eric Adams, he's unveiling a bold new plan to address public safety, declaring the city would not surrender to the violent few. Adams announced his intent to resurrect an anti-gun police unit. Now, this group was disbanded in 2020 after protests erupted around the murder of George Floyd. The mayor, he plans to deploy these so-called neighborhood safety teams over the next 3 weeks in precincts where he claims 80% of the city's crime occurs. He's a former cop himself, Adams, and he's also urging New York state lawmakers to make changes to state policies on bail and dealing with teenage defendants. Police arrested a 14-year-old boy Sunday for allegedly carjacking a driver. Now, some Democrats and community activists, they've criticized the plan, including Akeem Browder, whose teen brother Khalif died on Rikers Island after being held without bond for 3 years. So far, 5 police officers have been shot and killed in New York City this year. The Manhattan DA said Monday that he would prosecute anyone walking around Manhattan with a gun.
A Brooklyn, New York judge is dismissing over 100 felony convictions tied to a former NYPD detective. Joseph Franco was fired in 2020 after being indicted on 16 counts of first-degree perjury and other charges. This follows a Brooklyn DA in April who also dismissed 90 other cases related to Franco's testimony. Franco worked as an undercover narcotics detective in the Bronx from 2011 to 2015.
A 12-year-old Memphis boy who wrote a letter to the state's governor about a new gun law was killed by a stray bullet. Artemis Rayard was killed Christmas morning. Police say Artemis was playing with toys when a bullet smashed through his home's window. He died in his mother's arms. Artemis wrote Governor Bill Lee saying a new state law that allows most adults in the state of Tennessee to carry a gun without a permit would lead to more people being killed. Memphis reached a record 346 homicides in 2021.
A Connecticut medical examiner says a 23-year-old black woman was found dead after a date from social media, and they claim she died of an accidental drug overdose. The ME says Lauren Smith Fields died of an overdose tied to fentanyl, promethazine, and alcohol. An older white man that she met on the dating app Bumble the night before she rushed to the hospital, well, he reportedly called 911. That man, who has not been charged with a crime, says they spent the night drinking and watching TV after just meeting 3 days before. He told police the woman fell asleep and that he carried her to the bed, and said when he woke up the next morning, he found her laying there dead on bloody sheets. Now, Fields' family has accused the Bridgeport Police Department of not being responsive because of the victim's race, and they've signaled their intent to file a civil rights lawsuit. It's interesting, Lauren died in December. It took a really long time for this information to surface, for the medical examiner to come up with a cause of death, and it is questionable why this 23-year-old's death took so much effort from the family to get attention.
You know, this story haunts me because so young, so beautiful, a beautiful black young queen, and, you know, everyone wants love, right? We're all on Humble, on Bumble and Hinge and all of these apps, you know, trying to find love. And so this is something that you never, ever, ever expect to happen, never want to happen. Something when you're just trying to find, you know, potentially the love of your life. And also for this to be an accidental overdose, for that amount of drugs together, come on now, it doesn't make sense.
Well, hopefully with the attention that it's getting, I know several celebrities have jumped on to push the story even further into mainstream media. You know, hopefully there will be a deeper dive and investigation into this gentleman or, you know, possible suspect that this woman was with, because it's hard to believe that she took fentanyl and he didn't. He was just in the living room watching TV. That just sounds suspicious to me.
You know, I agree with that, Neil. At the end of the day, that's why we have shows like this, Fox Soul's Black Report. These are stories that sometimes just get pushed to the side because mainstream just will not carry the story. It's important that we bring this to life because someone needs to be held responsible for what happened to this young lady.
Absolutely. And just, you know, to our beautiful black young girls who are watching, you know, just really be careful. Try your best to protect yourself because the media, as we see, they are not going to cover our stories. And so just do the best that you can to protect yourself out here in America because they don't care about us.
An important warning for sure.
A father is suing New York City's Department on Homeless Services for the death of his infant child. A lawsuit alleges the agency responsible for his 1-year-old daughter neglected the child and ignored protocol. The baby was found along with her dead mother last summer after a neighbor reported a foul odor coming from their room. Now, court documents said the baby girl had been left alone there under the bed for 5 days. The suit said she was covered in human waste and was in desperate need of food and water. The baby's father is suing the city-run shelter for $5 million. Officials say it's still unclear how the mother died. The shelter is now required to do a daily wellness check.
A judge revoked bond for an Oklahoma man accused of burying the body of his employee beneath his backyard septic tank. Civil rights activists are demanding a judge to not give Daniel Triplett bond. However, police say Triplett, who owns a septic tank company, killed Brent Mack last September after investigators say they discovered a surveillance tape in Triplett's home. It showed the two men digging a hole in Triplett's backyard, but police say Mack never came out of the hole. After a full search, officers did find the body.
Homeowners in Illinois will now be able to remove racial covenants from their deeds. The clauses known as racial restrictive covenants were outlawed under the 1968 Fair Housing Act, but many of them still remain buried in deeds in a dozen of other states. The clauses barred people from selling homes to certain races and religious groups. In some states, it can be very difficult to remove the clauses. Now, for a lot of black men and black women out there that may not understand or even bought a home yet, may not even know this existed, right? So if you do research, at one point back in 1940, 80% of Chicago and Los Angeles carried restrictive covenants barring families to purchase homes. This is a major problem, and all across our country, I cannot believe that this is still happening in certain cities and states.
Yeah, this restrictive covenant, they were all outlawed back in the 60s, but they've still existed. There's one lady who said she got her deed that was dated March 1929, and she's been fighting for years to get this clause out of the deed. This is just an indication of what we've dealt with in the past. Sundown towns, redlining. These are all these tactics that existed to keep black people out of communities that did not want to integrate. And so it's a great thing, but we also want to see changes when it comes to mortgage approval rates and bank lending being more fair for people of color across the board.
Right, this is what we talk about when we say systemic racism, but we know former Congressional Black Caucus member Marcia Fudd is over housing right now, and she's doing a lot of policies that are helping to combat what we know as the disenfranchisement and systemic racism when it comes to people of color, and this is definitely an example of it.
I agree.